All right. Questions, comments?
Hi, Kent. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Let me get my headphones on. I can hear you even. Let me guess. You're calling in to announce you got converted.
Oh,
Oh,
no, I'm
tomorrow.
not.
Okay.
I'm calling maybe on your next open mic, but I'm
Okay.
calling about some of the points you've made in the past about the age of the Earth. And the first one is the claim that because of tidal friction, the moon's receding and the Earth's rotation slowing down at rates too fast for the Earth to be billions of years old.
Correct.
Well, if the moon is receding at about 3.8 centimeters per year, but since
Correct.
the moon is about 3.85 times 10 to the 10th centimeters from the Earth, it's already consistent with an Earth-Moon system that's billions of years old. And
Well,
also
you're missing.
one more
Well,
point. Yeah, go ahead.
Before you go on,
Sure.
if it's about the moon receding,
Yeah.
you're missing the major point. The inverse square law. Let's see. I've got it right here. The closer objects get, the stronger gravity becomes. So the recession rate today, 3.8 centimeters or 1.5 inches a year, would not have been the same in the past. They've done plenty of studies on this topic. Oh, I got to do something over.
Can I say something real quick, Ken?
If it's on the moon, let me finish with the moon first.
Yeah, sure.
And then,
Yeah, I'd
okay.
like to talk about the moon for
Sure.
a second. Yeah, go
Well,
ahead, though.
These are the peer-reviewed journals like NASA said the moon is average distance is about 238,000 miles. Moon is receding. This is from, I tried to document everything on here. But anyway, you agreed. The moon is receding about 1.5 or 3.8 centimeters a year. Okay. Is the moon leaving us? TheAtlantic.com. Yes, the moon is drifting away. The moon is drifting away. Thomas Barnes, let's see. Here's NASA.gov. We're drifting apart about 1.5 inches a year. Here's from Forbes magazine. Moon drifting away from the Earth. Astronomy magazines moving away 1.5 inches a year. Bye bye moon. Are we losing the moon? Spaceanswers.com. Yep. The moon is spiraling away. Physics.org. Why is the moon leaving us? The moon is moving away at the rate of 4 centimeters a year because of tidal friction. And let's see. So you can't use the distance between the Earth and the moon today and today's rate to come up with the numbers you're coming up with.
Well, that's one of my points is that creationists want to use uniformitarianism in this case, where they've been complaining about uniformitarianism in other aspects of geology, for example. But we have evidence that the Earth rotation was, let me see, the magnitude of the tidal friction. For one thing, it depends on the arrangement of continents, which we know were different in the past. Now, I know you don't accept Pangea and that kind of thing. But
you guys always say this. We know this in the past. We know that in the past. You don't know any of those things. You have to imagine. But go ahead.
Well,
you don't know.
I mean, we'll talk
about
that some other time. But we do have the rate of the Earth's rotation in the distant past can be measured. Corals produce daily layers and yearly patterns, which show from about 180 to 400 million years ago, lengths of 381 to 410 days in a year. So we show different rates, and it's not a uniformitarian rate that we would expect for the moon to be receding, if that makes sense.
Well, here is from Astronomical Journal, back 30 years ago. The evolution of the lunar semi-major axis presents a well-known timescale problem. The lunar orbit collapses a little over 1 billion years ago. Were they wrong? This is a peer-reviewed journal. That the moon, if you bring the moon back in closer, the inverse square law would say the gravity would be much. If you bring the moon into 1/3 the distance, it's 9 times the gravitational pull. So this affects a lot of things. The moon would have to be going much faster just to stay in orbit, much faster. So to say that we know the length of the day from the coral and stuff like that, I think is a real stretch. We'll do a whole program on that sometime.
Okay.
This is from
Space.
Here's from space.com, I think a peer-reviewed journal. If we take the moon's current rate of recession and project it back in time, we end up with a collision between the Earth and moon 1.5 billion years. However, the moon was formed around 4.5 billion years ago. So the current recession rate is a poor guide for the past. I would agree.
And that's why I mentioned how that's assuming a uniformitarian rate of recession. Can I bring up another point,
Oh, sure.
though?
Go ahead. Okay.
Is and this is has to do with the erosion and the Grand Canyon, but I know that you relate the Toutle River flowing out of Spirit Lake on Mount St. Helens, which has carved a canyon like a miniature Grand Canyon.
Mhm.
And according to creationists, that shows that the Grand Canyon can form suddenly. Uh, and I think you've used that argument in the past, but we know that that canyon was formed in very unconsolidated volcanic ash, which is very easily eroded,
That's
and
correct.
that the steepness of that river coming off of Mount St. Helens is a lot. The gradient's a lot steeper than
Right.
what we
Right.
see the Colorado River. So I don't know that that's, and also it's a lot smaller than the Grand Canyon, what we see there.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't think that
Mhm.
can really be used to as an analogy for the Grand Canyon, the Toutle River in Mount St. Helens.
Well, let's assume for a minute that the Bible is true. I know you don't want to believe that, but let's say the Bible's true. Okay. During the flood, thousands of feet of layers of material would form. All the layers we see in the earth in the so-called geologic column probably formed during that flood. They're not different ages. All of them were still soft. If you plugged up Grand Canyon today, I've got pictures of this somewhere. Uh, the a giant lake would fill up behind it called Grand Lake. You can go back here. You go Grand Canyon. Okay? I've been to Grand Canyon many times. Been down to the bottom of it. Flew down in a helicopter down there. They said we went back, 300 million years. And I looked at my watch. It was the same day. Here we go. Grand Canyon. There we go. Grand Canyon. There we go. Here are some things to consider about Grand Canyon.
Keep that
The top.
figure up there for a second, or go back to it when you get a chance. You had yeah, that I'd like that
Okay.
geologic column that you had.
Here, the trail of time. You follow the trail down. It's got different times. This is all pure baloney. They should take those things, those brass stickers off. They're stupid.
See,
All the
now, how do
layers.
you get those? How do you get those layers that were tilted beneath the great unconformity there? How would you get those tilt in
Oh,
your
during the
model
flood.
of the? How
Yeah,
could you get soft layers that would tilt, and then you'd
no,
have
no
other soft
problem.
layers form on?
Well, you guys have never answered the question, how can the top layer be younger? All the dirt in the universe is the same age, whether 6,000 or 6 trillion. It's all the same
Yeah, but
age.
we're
The top.
dating the layer, not the grains of material in the layer. So we're dating the formation of the layer itself.
So
So
if the dirt if the dirt
as
got
sea level, well, let me finish here. As sea
okay,
level rises or falls, you'll get a different layer above the layer below it. So,
and you get the
a
same thing
limestone
with the
layer will be a deeper sea layer than a shale or a sandstone, and you might have a dune deposit, but each of these is piled on each other depending on in the Grand Canyon, it's due to sea level rising and falling.
well, the sea level would rise and fall just with tidal pumping also. If the moon were holding the tide up on the earth like it does today, holds a bump called the high tide while we spin under it, just that tide going up and down where the Grand Canyon is now would make all these layers in 1 year. The crust of the earth is obviously still broken up today, fault lines all over. During the flood, the crust of the earth would be freshly broken. So a lot of the pieces are easier to move now that a lot of them are locked into place along the fault lines. Okay. But all the layers were soft and all of them were carved quickly. I'll show you.
If they were
Shale.
soft, why would they not be at a like a 45 or you would have a lot of sloughing off and you wouldn't have vertical walls if they were soft. It
Well,
would
this,
be
I
like
covered.
Toutle River where it's, you have a 45-degree angle going down to the river because it's soft sediment. If it was soft sediment, you wouldn't have these big cliffs like you have. It had to have
No, we cover all that video. Let me stick on my topic here. A
been,
Grand
yeah.
Canyon is a washed out dam like this one here. Lake got too full, went over the top, washed a crack out of it. Okay. They say you look back through millions of years. No, you don't. You look down in a hole in the dirt. I get a schematic from the side view here. Water from Wyoming goes through the Grand Canyon. Okay, it has a
Right.
huge drainage pattern. There's Grand Canyon right there. It's a cut right across what's called the Kaibab Plateau. The Kaibab Plateau is a ridge, like a wrinkle in your carpet, that goes all the way across the state of Arizona. The Kaibab Plateau, you can see by the snow line here, it's real obvious. The top of that plateau is 7,000 or 8,000 foot elevation. The river enters at 2,800. There is the high spot between these two lines. The river flows downhill 277 miles. Here's a side schematic view. The top is, let's call it 7,000 to 8,000. Rivers don't flow. The river
Well,
flows downhill.
you had the uplift of the Colorado Plateau occurring at the same time that the Colorado River was eroding down through the layers.
That's what you guys are imagining. There's a much simpler explanation. For 50 or 100 years after Noah's flood, this big lake existed behind it called Grand Lake. When the lake got too full, it went over the top, and pictures over here somewhere. The rivers don't flow uphill. There's no delta. This is the lake that would form Grand Lake and Hopi Lake. If you plugged up Grand Canyon today, those lakes would form again. Just follow the elevation line.
The idea is that, yes, those lakes definitely existed, and that they might have formed the initial channel of the Grand Canyon when, as you said, a dam broke or what have you. But it was the gradual uplift of the Colorado Plateau and the erosion of the Colorado River happening at the same time that created the Grand Canyon. And,
I disagree. You're stating that. I disagree completely. You guys have stated that for years. You're making a statement that you cannot possibly prove. The ground lifted up at the same level, at the same rate the river cut it down. There's a much simpler explanation. A lake overflowed.
Why would the walls be vertical then if it was soft sediment and it was cutting down through soft sediment? Why would you have cliffs, which the Grand Canyon, you showed a picture of it, you have cliffs rising on either side of the river. Why would you have that steep of cliffs if the sediment was soft? It had to have been hardened, and it was hardened for a long time.
Come visit our gravel pit. We have steep cliffs here that are still soft clay. One just collapsed the other night in the rainstorm down by Will's house. Oh, the cliffs are still, and there's perfectly 90 degrees.
I've been to Dinosaur Adventureland, by the way.
Okay, well, if the river, if the lake got too full, Grand Lake would overflow and start eroding the other side, eat its way backwards. Maybe this happened 200 years after Noah's, and the ground had time to solidify. That's why you have the steep cliffs. I don't know when it happened.
I mean, there's a lot of presuppositions there that Noah's flood actually happened.
You get all the presuppositions you have. The plateau is rising at the same rate the river is cutting. That's a complete supposition. You don't know any such thing like that. That's the standards.
We have evidence of that, but
we have evidence. That's just to make you guys make these statements. We have lots of evidence, and you move right on. You have no such evidence. You have a belief.
Well, we'll discuss the Grand Canyon in more detail sometime. I think that would be a good discussion for us to have.
Okay, here's a dam.
It's a big topic, though, as you know.
Right. So I know why, because you guys need billions of years.
Well,
and anything it's like pulling a pacifier out of a baby's mouth. You take away the billions of years.
They have the radiometric dates. We didn't invent those.
We've been through all that.
Yeah, but we didn't invent that.
The radiometric date,
and we have the fossil record, which doesn't fit your flood geology fossil record.
There is no such thing as a fossil record. There are fossils. We have thousands of them here. I like fossils. They probably all formed in Noah's flood. Can you tell me any place where fossils are forming today?
Fossils are forming in every environment today. It's happening underneath the surface.
Is there any scientific evidence of fossils forming
beaches
today?
You don't think that there's beaches where shells are getting buried, clams are getting buried that have died?
Clams are getting buried alive
that will fossilize in the future?
No, you're imagining that. That's not observable science. We find hundreds, if not thousands, of petrified clams in the closed position. You can go to the beach and find 1 million seashells, but you don't find them closed and petrified. Had to be buried quickly. Probably Noah's flood made all the fossils in the world in 1 year.
In the Grand Canyon, from the bottom to the top, we see at the bottom layers single-celled organisms. Gradually, the fossils become more complex as you go up in the Grand Canyon. You get, mollusks and stuff like that. And at the top, you actually are getting fish.
Right.
So we don't see this order that flood geology tells us, that you see clams at the bottom, and then all the way to the top, you'll get the things that couldn't swim, that could swim better or what have you. That's not what the Grand Canyon shows.
Well, you're demonstrating you have been thoroughly indoctrinated with what they teach in the schools these days. I completely disagree. I think during a flood scenario with thousands of layers being deposited, every tide going up and down would scramble things. You could get all sorts of orders. You probably are generally going to get lighter creatures on top, though not always. Have you watched the video that made 30 years ago called Experiments in Stratification?
I don't think so.
Just Google that, Experiments in Stratification. He shows you can watch it happen. As the water flows sideways, it makes 8 or 10 layers at the same time. The layers form this way, not this way. Watch the video, Experiments in Stratification. It's been known for years. Okay.
I will. I mean, it's interesting in the Grand Canyon how at the top layer you have the Permian limestone, and throughout the layers of the Grand Canyon, you don't have any mammal fossils, you don't have any bird fossils, and you don't have any reptile fossils, because those organisms had not evolved yet as of the Permian. So you do find them in higher layers of the Grand Staircase up toward Bryce Canyon in that area, but you do not find them in the Grand Canyon themselves, which is a point against flood geology.
Well, I know you wish to believe that, okay? Because the Bible says the scoffers are willingly ignorant of that flood because it represents the judgment. I understand why you don't want to believe in the flood. I really understand. But Grand Canyon is a washed out dam. The evidence is overwhelming. If you just look at it, look at Grand Canyon, those lakes drained, where they would have cut that canyon in a few days, not millions of years. And that area right there is where they find Monument Valley. The water was rushing around these, what are today called buttes, okay? Or it's all explainable by a rapid erosion. Grand Lake overflowed, started eroding the other side, ate its way backwards. Maybe this was 200 years after Noah's flood. I don't know. Maybe the ground had time to harden where it would hold a vertical cliff. I know our gravel pit here, they dug it for 60 years. They stopped digging 20 years ago. And the vertical cliff over behind Will's cabin is still soft. It collapsed 2 days ago, some of it in the rainstorm. So you can have a vertical cliff that is soft, hold for years.
Anyway, thank you, Kent. And we'll talk again. I appreciate you giving me.
And it's a very interesting story, the formation of evolution religion. Very interesting story. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.